Good afternoon. I want to thank the board for the opportunity to share the research update with you today. I'm here to represent the National Wild Horse and Burro Research Advisory Team, and the members of that team include Joe Stratton, who is the National Research Coordinator, and with BLM, Butch Raleigh, who is with the U.S. Geological Survey, myself with the United States Department of Agriculture, APHIS Veterinary Services, and Vern Dooley, who represents research interests on your advisory board. So I'm just going to run through the research update similarly that you've seen it in the past. There is some redundancy here from some past updates because we have some new board members, so just bear with me on that. I tried to find some new photos at least, but this is all you really get for photos, so enjoy them while you see them. These are photos of PZP application. The liquid dose of primer is being given in the upper right, and the pellets are being given in the lower right-hand corner. So I'll start by saying that BLM has signed the instruction memorandum that outlines how they will begin using the improved population estimation techniques. A key part of this plan is to hire a population inventory lead. That position has been classified and is expected to be advertised this month. It will be located in Reno, and that person eventually will also serve as the National Wild Horse and Burro Research Coordinator. One of our exciting developments, which you've heard a little bit about, is the examination of Spay Vac as a potential long-lasting immunocontraceptive agent. It uses porcine zona pellucida, PZP, just like the conventional PZP immunovaccine, but it also uses a sort of a novel liposome technology in the vaccine. Some preliminary work has been done in Nevada with estray horses, and everything seems to suggest that it will be a long-lasting or permanent agent following one injection. The USGS is leading a 5-year research initiative. The first part of that is the safety and mechanism of action work that is underway at Oregon State University. It examined the effects on target tissues and non-target tissues. So in other words, it looked at ovaries as well as some of the other organs, kidneys, liver, that sort of thing. And the preliminary examination of the titer results suggest that 2 of the formulations are most promising. And so those will carry forward into the next phase of study. The second part of this sort of 5-pronged approach, if you will, is to advance the registration of the agent with the EPA and get a label for it as an approved agent for long-term contraception. And the licensed agent, Mark Fraker, through Terramar Industries, is working with the EPA on that process. USGS is also examining parameters for use of a longer lasting or permanent contraceptive through some modeling work and to look at the genetic implications of a long lasting contraceptive agent. They have identified this Vortex population viability analysis software as a good candidate for that modeling, and they're kind of just getting started with that effort, but it's expected to advance, I'd say, in the next 6 months for sure. Yes?
I realize that the major cost, or a lot of the cost involved with using the PZP-22 is the pellet, the clay pellet itself that's, that's mixed in with.
Right.
Will this liposome technology reduce the cost of that injection?
I don't think so. It seems to be priced just about the same place.
Okay.
Coincidence. So the next, the phase that I sort of alluded to following this, the small titer safety and mechanism of action study would be a captive breeding trial. There's a collaborative effort between USGS, APHIS, and BLM. It will include test breeding of mares with stallions and titer analysis. 2 formulations will be advanced and examined in comparison to control horses during that study. It will be conducted at the Pauls Valley facility in Oklahoma. We've made a 5-year commitment to this study using about 90 mares and about 12 stallions In this instance, the mares are going to be housed in 3 30-acre pastures with, as I said, titer analysis and pregnancy testing during the study, and it's scheduled to begin just at the end of this month.
And these are wild horses?
Correct.
And is there something for the mistakes that might happen? Is there a portion of this that potential adopters are already lined up?
Yeah, there are control mares that aren't treated with an immunocontraceptive, so in theory, and hopefully they will be having foals. And those foals will enter the adoption program just like any other foal born in a facility to a captive.
Is there any thought been given to, since you already know that's going to happen, to maybe market that
Having like a
adoption
special adoption?
in a specifically?
They've talked about it at Pauls Valley already because they kind of realized that, you know, people are probably going to be following those mares and watching those mares. So whether there's a special event, I'm not sure we've gotten that far yet. You know, we'll be over a year away from any of those mares having foals because we're going to start with mares that we know have not been exposed to a stallion.
Thank you.
But we're expecting maybe 20 foals a year just among the controls at least. And we can certainly kind of put that on the list with the adoption folks to see if they want to make that an event.
Okay, thank you.
The final stage of this would be testing in free roaming herds, and at this point that awaits at least the demonstration of safety and a reasonable expectation of efficacy during the first parts of the study, and namely this captive breeding trial and the work that was done at Oregon State University. So in a similar study continues. It's something BLM has been working with Dr. John Turner at the Medical College of Toledo for some time. The goal there is to develop the current PZP-22 vaccine into a 3 to 4 year agent given at one time. So in other words, primer and booster, pelleted booster. You hear us talk about the pellets. This is an attempt to make that last longer. The laboratory research, it says continues there, but actually the laboratory part's kind of been completed. They've made good progress with new pelleting technology, and the in vitro data came out as hoped. So therefore that formulation is going to move forward with a captive breeding trial. That trial will also begin this month at the Carson City Prison in Nevada, and a 4-year commitment's been made to that study with the Carson City Prison and Nevada BLM. They're going to use 80 mares and about 12 stallions. In that case, they're going to house the horses in 6 half-acre pens, and that will also include titer analysis as well as pregnancy testing over the next 4 years. Yes?
I guess you're aware the Nevada governor's budget is closing the Carson City Prison.
Oh, well.
That 4-year commitment might not be there.
I wasn't aware of that. I guess maybe we'll try and take the horses wherever the prisoners go. I don't know. I hadn't heard that. Hopefully that's something we can address. There also is a collaborative project ongoing with the Humane Society of the United States, which I think Dean talked about a little bit earlier. Those are field trials that include individual animal monitoring in Sandwash, Colorado, and also the Cedar Mountain HMA in Utah. HSUS has the technicians in the field where they monitor foaling and they compare foaling between treated and control mares. They're also doing some behavioral assessments. Some of their early data is in, and they've shared with us. In Sandwash, 72% of the untreated mares foaled, 48% of the treated mares foaled, for a resulting population increase of about 19%. That's not quite the performance we'd hoped for, and they attribute this to the timing of the treatment, which occurred in October, rather than the ideal window of December to January. The researchers have recommended modifying the vaccine should BLM see that they're going to use it quite a bit outside the ideal time period. This is something we're still reviewing and talking to them about. I'm not sure yet how that's going to proceed. The exciting thing is that they have developed a dart which will deliver the pellets, and that's something we did not have previously. Just in the last year, they've kind of figured out how to get the pellets to come out of a dart reliably. In the sand wash, as I said earlier, they've been able to dart 80% of the previously treated mares, and I think all but one of those darts function just fine. About half those treatments were with the pellets, and well, about 2/3, 30 some with the pellets, 17, does that add up to 50? Yeah, 17 some with the liquid agent only. But they still had very good luck with their darts, which is good. And those mares were treated in September and October of 2010. In the Cedar Mountain, 65% of the mares were 65% of the untreated mares foaled, and 26% of the treated mares foaled, with a resultant population increase of about 16%. Field darting has been much more difficult in the Cedars. They have not been able to dart any of the previously treated mares to date. They tried some this fall. They will again try to do this in the spring. They are using a new remote-controlled dart gun over a mineral lick kind of a bait, but those horses are proving difficult to get close enough to. Their early work suggests no obvious behavioral effects noted in the mares, and they are discussing bringing a third herd into a similar research protocol with the Forest Service. One of the other things that BLM has examined in the last year is a proposal to test the safety of spaying wild horse mares by a vaginal approach, colpotomy. Some work has been done using this approach on the Sheldon Wildlife Refuge, as well as in some private herds in California. So far, they've only done short-term post-operative monitoring in these cases. They want to examine the safety of the procedure during the early, mid, and late stages of gestation. They have received IACUC approval from the University of Nevada, Reno. There are no provisions in the study to examine the efficacy of this procedure for controlling population growth rates. BLM management intends to pursue the project, but no determination has been made yet on how, when, or where.
It seems to me that in order to go forward with something like this type of study, wouldn't you need some kind of provision to examine population growth? I mean, that's the whole reason why we would be looking at that. So I would think that that should be an integral part of the initial protocol.
Well, it's kind of, to some extent, you have to take it one step at a time. In other words, the first thing we need to do is examine the safety of the procedure in a more controlled setting.
Of wild horses or domestic horses?
Wild horses is the plan. And then ultimately you would go out into the field and start to look at population growth rates. But it's really, the first hurdle, I think, is to see how well it's going to work on a cross-section of mares as they would come in on a typical gather. And then down the, if that looks good down the road, then you might take it to the field and do some more population level follow-up. It's hard to do the kind of follow-up we want to see for the safety studies on a free-roaming herd because you can't follow them closely. So it's kind of a catch-22. You can't do both at the same time very easily. That's the thought. The Fertility Control Field Trials, in which we followed individually monitored horses, are essentially complete. The application of PZP continues in those states and obviously at the population level on a much broader scale. But the studies where we followed individual horses are mostly completed. There's a few horses that are still being followed each year that have not yet returned to fertility. That's in McCullough Peaks. The behavioral studies and injection reaction studies have been published. The efficacy manuscript is currently in review and is expected to be out shortly. These are some of the numbers you've seen. We try and update them, and I think our numbers agree. I watched Dean's numbers, and I added the antelope in, so the number will be different, but I think it's still the correct one. So that's what, since this effort started in '04, these are mostly the population level field trials. '04 to 2010, 79 HMAs with just under 3,000 horses treated. And then these are the numbers for 2011. You'll see two different groups of treatments up there. The CTR is the catch, treat, and release gathers, which are not really under a research protocol in the same sense that the others were conducted, but we include them here for completeness so you can see all the mares treated in one place, basically. And completed in 2011 to date was 13 HMAs, 624 mares. That includes the 21 that were treated on antelope, which I think is the right number. 24? Okay, so I'll have to modify that a little bit. And that puts us just at about 3,500 mares treated since '04 in these field trials.
On that slide, I think we had different numbers.
You did slightly.
Okay.
I tried to add in add in this Antelope Valley, which was just completed since the papers in your book were put out.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be 24. I thought it was 21, so it's going to change again.
So this is a higher number?
This is a higher number. Sorry, I was pointing over there. I added antelope. Okay, that wasn't even completed when I wrote the thing that's in your binder. And then this number should be 24 as I understand it. I thought it was 21. We'll double check that, and that number might change a little bit.
Okay, I looked right at it, Adobe, and your
I
slide
combined
says,
Adobe Town and Salt Wells because I ran out of room on the slide.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Okay, thank
They're
you.
they're two different HMAs, but they are a complex, so I put them together just to make it fit.
Thank you.
Dr. King,
Yes, sir.
how many years have we been dealing with PZP 22?
Well, this initiative started in 2004. Clan Alpine was treated with pellets, and that Clan Alpine was treated in, I want to say about 98 or 99. So I think that was probably the first.
It just seems odd to me that we're still dealing in the clinical trials stage, with the product this many years after initiation. I mean, I can understand the follow-up on fertility, but with the actual application of the drug,
right?
It seems odd to me that we're still considering it. We're still investigating.
Well, okay, so there's a couple of reasons for that.
I guess.
Well, we are and we aren't really. Number one, we're trying to make it last longer. So a lot of the research you just heard discussed was to formulate new pellets.
Correct, but we're still dealing with the original. Well, not the original, but the 22. Correct.
Right, and CTR gathers really, we still consider it investigational because it's an unapproved product. So we really kind of have to call it investigational, but we don't regard them as part of the field trials. We really do regard them as implementation with the investigational product. So, until we started the CTR gathers, we kind of said this is all research. Now it is investigational, and until it has a label, it will be. But the CTR gathers really are not, in my opinion, done. In terms of research, it's more of an implementation. So, as far as the length of time to sort of modify, formulate, put back together, we've changed the way pellets are manufactured so they'd be more efficient, so there'd be less loss of raw material to try and control costs, and we're trying to make them last longer.
It appears that there's actually some good news on the horizon for Spay Vac.
Right.
How do you feel about, what's your impression clinically on the GnRH product that's being used in the, you kind of winced. I mean, I'm curious. I'm curious.
Well,
why.
I think the jury's out still. I think it's promising. The data that we have so far, in my opinion, does not suggest that it's any more effective or longer lasting than PZP 22. But that was a small number of horses in one study, and the formulation has been modified a few times, including since then. So it's my understanding that the adjuvant's changed, and it is being used in Teddy Roosevelt National Forest, and this will be the first foaling season. So the jury's out. I'm hopeful that it's highly effective, and I hope it lasts for a long time. I think it would be great.
Am I right in assuming that we're using if we have immunity against GnRH in the animal, they won't be coming into estrus, whereas with PZP that the estrus still occurs?
That is the thought, and that theoretically that's true. I think you have to remember that mares cycle with different amounts of vigor, and some mares will cycle even though they don't show it, and some mares will show a little bit of estrus behavior when they're not cycling. So I think part of what the jury is still out on includes their behavioral work, which will help address that. In theory, you're correct; they shouldn't cycle.
Which to me would be a good thing. I mean, if that in fact pans out.
I think either way can be a workable scenario. I think there's pros and cons to cycling, and there's pros and cons to not cycling. And I don't know, the behavioral work that we've done so far has not identified, strong negative influences of PZP22 with regard to behavioral influences. And those mares continue to cycle. Now, what having mares stop cycling might do behaviorally, I don't know yet. So I think every time you think there's something like that, well, clearly this would be better. Well, would it or wouldn't it be necessarily? I mean, do you want some of that? Do you want to still preserve some of that behavior? Is it going to affect group size? Is it going to affect band size? That sort of thing. But again, I think the jury's out, and I look forward to early winter when the results will start coming in from that other project. That's for those of you that don't know, that's a project being done by the National Park Service in Teddy Roosevelt National Park, in Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota.
Thank you.
And USGS is helping with that a little bit. They helped them set up some of the behavioral monitoring. Colorado State University is involved, and the National Park Service is leading the effort.
Al?
Yes, sir.
Is the behavioral, the herd behavioral patterns, is that what's holding up just the flat out spaying of mares?
No, not necessarily. I think some of it's the practicality of trying to do that procedure on a large scale. It's nothing like spaying a heifer, and cattle can be spayed very easily. It's a little more, well, it's a lot more complicated. The potential for side effects and complications is much greater. And a lot of it has to do with the practicality of doing it on a large scale, particularly in the field. The potential effects on herd behavior or individual mare behavior are an issue, or are something you have to think about.
There's the vaginal spay out there, and then there's some veterinarians that are trying to develop a midline.
Yeah, it's the
spaying process. It
right.
seems to have worked
on mares.
well on mares.
It's not really a matter of developing it. I mean, the surgery's been done for years. It's never been done on large scale. It's never been done in wild horses on a large scale. There are several surgical approaches using either sedation and keeping the mare standing, or inducing anesthesia and laying the mare down. They all have their pros and cons. None of them are, for example, as simple as castrating a stallion. It's just a more complicated procedure. So it's been done standing. It's been done with mares anesthetized and recumbent, either through midline or flank approaches. It's been done by colpotomy. It's done by laparoscopy. Probably the more exciting thing nowadays is this natural orifice fiber optic guided approach, which has been done in other species, but I'm not sure it's been done in horses. So that's something I think might be on the horizon. Running out of time?
Yeah.
Was that? Sorry. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
you had one more slide.
two more. These are herds that were proposed for treatment as part of the field trials, not necessarily CTR. These have been canceled because of the budget situation. They were scheduled to be done in July, August, and September of 2011 fiscal year. And finally, the genetic assistance agreement continues with Dr. Cothran. They've moved to DNA analysis using hair rather than blood samples. The reporting is pretty well back on schedule, and he's current within a couple of months generally of receiving the samples. BLM gets the reports back, and a comprehensive or meta-analysis, if you will, across the entire program is expected this fiscal year.
Janet?
Now, how will the National Academy of Science study relate to your team? I mean, what will they be looking at the research and science that you all are doing? I mean, please explain how, like, what that relationship might be.
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I haven't been contacted by them. I expect at some point, you know, we will sort of discuss things with them or what have you. Theirs is an independent review, so I can't answer that question. I think they review the body of literature that's in the scientific community. They're not just going to come to us and ask us what we think. They're going to go to the literature and see what's been done, and they'll evaluate that, you know, independently.
Any other questions for Dr. King? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just as a time check, we have about 45 minutes left to cover 4 more subjects before we adjourn for the day. So next item, Carla, you're going to walk us through, I think, hopefully you're summarizing the OHG report and you're concentrating more on the recommendations, which are on page 14 of our sheet.
Thank you. Am I back on? Okay. The Office of the Inspector General works for the Secretary of the Interior, and their job is to investigate any allegations of waste, fraud, mismanagement. And they take that very seriously. And so every time the Office of Inspector General comes to call, we sit up and we take notice and we try to give them the best answers that we can. This particular report was concluded in a letter to us on December 13th. And it's been posted on the Office of Inspector General website. So what I'll just do is try to kind of quickly go through what they looked at, what they found, and what BLM's response was. We responded on January 26th. So the letter I'm reading, which is on their website now and will be part of our materials posted later, their objective was to determine if wild horse and burro gathers are necessary and justified, and if wild horses and burros are being mistreated. Do we need to gather? Are we being okay to the horses? Their inspection confirmed that wild horse and burro gathers are necessary because BLM lands cannot sustain the growing population of wild horses and burros. The growing population of these animals must be addressed to achieve and maintain a thriving natural ecological balance of the authorized uses of the land, thus gathers are necessary and justified actions. Further, we did not observe any inhumane treatment of wild horses and burros. Now in their report, I've just got a few pages marked so I can talk about some of the things that they found. They did go visit several gatherers and many facilities. And in this particular paragraph is on page 6 and related to gathers. They did find that regardless of which method of capture is used, the risk that horses or burros will be injured or killed is an unavoidable consequence of gathering. Injuries and broken bones can and do result from the effort to herd, capture, and transport the animals. In addition, gathered horses and burros that are affected by chronic or incurable disease, injury, lameness, or other serious physical defect, including severe tooth loss or wear, club feet, or other severe acquired or congenital abnormalities, these horses and burros are humanely euthanized. BLM had reported, and they reported in their report, that the number of horses that died or were euthanized at its herd management areas in fiscal year 2010 was 95 out of the 11,039 it gathered, or less than 1%. Page 7, I have a few things to talk about. They talked about the number of horses that we're holding in short-term facilities and long-term holding facilities. And although they found that, although the Act directs, the Wild and Free Roam and Horse and Burro Act of 1971 directs BLM to sell excess horses or burros without limitation, BLM has taken the stance to not sell or send horses or burros to slaughter. Program costs have trended upward as the total horse population, both on public lands and in holding facilities, has continued to increase. A few more findings on page 9. The IG found that fiercely competing interests and highly charged differences of opinion currently exist. And in addition, public interest groups have claimed that the science behind program management is inaccurate. They do recognize that BLM has acknowledged that the science behind its program needs to be reviewed, and we are going to the National Academy of Science to review our science, and Dean will talk a little bit more about that later today. One other finding was the need and justification for gathers, and they found that gathers are necessary for population control because we are required by law to manage the range for authorized multiple uses, including wild horses and burros, livestock grazing, wildlife, for example, deer, elk, and antelope, and for the protection of habitat for threatened and endangered species. All of these authorized uses compete for the limited amount of forage and water available on the range. On page 10, they talk again that gathers are justified. On page 11, a few quotes. They did note that BLM has relied upon census techniques that are known to undercount the population of horses, but BLM is addressing the issue in coordination with the U.S. Geological Survey. Further, and again, BLM has asked the National Academy of Science to review the science supporting its gathers. On page 11, they talk about treatment of wild horses and burros. They found no evidence of BLM or its contractors mistreating the animals. And BLM is operating within the confines of its handbook with regard to carrying out the gathers. They observed, as part of their investigation, the use of helicopters, the movement and capture of wild horses, the transportation of wild horses from the capture sites to holding facilities, the veterinarian services provided on site, the conditions at the short and long-term holding facilities, and the condition of the wild horses and burros housed. They do have, I guess, to keep running through this without spending all the time it would take to look at it carefully, because you can do that with your copy and hopefully have. I'm going to go right to the January 26th response from BLM, because this response letter from January 26th addresses the recommendations from the December 13th report from the Office of Inspector General. Their first recommendation: there is urgent and aggressive focus on research and testing of improved population control methods to balance wild horse and burro population growth with adoption demand, thereby minimizing the need for additional long-term holding facilities and preserves. And our response is that we're going to increase the number of mares treated with PZP. And actually, since we responded in January, we have actually increased our goal of increasing from about 1,250 mares up to 2,000 mares a year if we can afford it. The BLM is pursuing with the USGS, industry and academia, those research projects that you heard Al talking about. Their second recommendation for BLM is there is an ambitious effort to minimize and reduce over the long term the need for short and long-term holding facilities. And this talks about, BLM's response to this is that we will implement partnership sanctuaries or farm service agency pasture programs when it's equally or more cost effective to do so. And my next presentation after the OIG report will go a little bit into sanctuaries, and then that's also part of the strategy, which we'll talk about tomorrow. So we are moving forward with that as well. The third recommendation from the Office of Inspector General The best science for wild horse and burro management and needed new research is coordinated with and confirmed by the National Academy of Sciences and the results put into practice. So again, BLM will continue to use the best available science to manage wild horses and burros. And as part of this commitment, we will be working with the National Academy of Science, and Dean will talk more specifically about that. But the OIG essentially found that our gathers are necessary and they are humane, and we were very happy to hear that, and we want to take their recommendations and put them into practice. So any questions specifically on the OIG report and our response? Yes.
Yeah, just one brief thing on the recommendation one of the paragraphs in here, it says that they recommend and really looking into using vasectomy to control population in addition to the PZP. Is that my understanding?
Are you looking at the BLM response?
I'm looking at the BLM is, it's the BLM's response rather to the recommendation. Recommendation one, the third paragraph down.
Yeah, we would consult with the National Academy of Science to determine if there is credible scientific evidence to indicate vasectomies would be effective in controlling herd growth rates, or if there are other methods for managing stallions that would tangibly suppress population growth. So that'll be part of the National Academy of Science review. We'll ask them to do that.
Yeah, because it just seems to me that it would be a viable option in this. I know there's been some pretty good evidence that chemical vasectomies are easy to do in the field, much less complicated than the spay options and that kind of thing.
Okay. So we're definitely, that's part of what we're going to ask National Academy of Science to help us with.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions? I do actually have a slide for the next subject, which is partnership sanctuaries. It's not a very pretty slide, it's just words. Oh, no worries. I'm going to give you all the time that's left. When we talk about the proposed strategy and all the work that BLM does, it's kind of a continuum. It's not a stopping and starting. So just because we have a proposed strategy right now doesn't mean we're not doing anything, because we've been trying to move forward with fertility control for the past 10 years. We're always looking at improving our ability to work with the horses and work with the public, be more transparent. We really know we have to keep doing these things, so we're not just waiting till this strategy is approved to begin, but we want to take these steps right away. And one of the things that we're moving forward on are the public-private sanctuaries. Wild Horse and Burro Act allows BLM to enter into partnership agreements with landowners. So if you are a landowner and you want to provide a sanctuary for horses that will allow the public to come in and see how those horses are managed, and learn more about those horses, be more excited about those horses, that's what the director of BLM wants these public-private sanctuaries to accomplish. We want to make sure, though, that just because somebody has a really great idea, that we don't take steps that aren't legal or are affordable. So we've developed some very specific criteria to make sure that sanctuary proposals are legal and that they do save the taxpayers money. Because we have a couple of objectives. Long-term holding costs and short-term holding costs are quite expensive. They're more than 50% of our budget, if you remember that pie chart. We need to reduce those costs for the American taxpayer. There's a lot of things that people want to spend their taxpayers' monies on, and not necessarily that. If we can get parties on the outside to say, look, we want to help with the horses, we have some interest, we think we can generate some of our own funds from people that want to work with our nonprofit, we think we can help you, therefore we think we can save the taxpayer some money. So this slide shows that there's a couple of things we're doing. We know we need to have fair and open competition for these sanctuaries, because there's more than one sanctuary proposal out there. We can't just pick one and say, you're my favorite. We need to develop a process by which people can compete fairly. We believe that next Tuesday, if all goes well, we'll have our first request for applications out on a site called grants.gov, and people will be able to apply for these sanctuary proposals. There'll be a 60-day period by which they can apply. We'll have all the questions and criteria outlined so they'll know, how do I know if I have a good proposal? And so the criteria we're asking are, how will you control the horses? How will you make sure that they're fed and watered? How will you take care of them year-round? What's your plan if the horses escape? So we have a number of these questions in those criteria, and proponents will be able to answer those questions. We give them 60 days to do that. An interesting thing will happen once the proposals get on grants.gov. They won't be able to just walk into a BLM office and say, hey, I'd like to do this. They'll actually have to go through that process because it's a very structured process under the federal regulations to make sure that everybody has the same fair chance. One of the things that'll happen is if they have questions about it, they'll be able to funnel those questions into centralized people. The people will take those questions, get the answers, and then they will post those answers to all of the questions in one place. So everybody has the same ability to learn from the questions being asked and answered. We do want to provide a better value for the American taxpayer, reducing the cost of long-term pastures and finding more homes for excess horses. We want to provide a better situation for the horses by providing better visibility for them, providing education for the public and training opportunities for the horses, and increasing adoption and sale opportunities. Now, the first request for applications that may be out next week will be for proposals that are only on private land. That's kind of the simplest one out of the box. And in a couple of weeks after that, and hopefully still by the end of March, we hope to have the next set of criteria that will help somebody that might have a combination of private land and maybe some public land, and they could propose that we would like to use our private land in conjunction with your public land. Now, even after we have these proposals coming into BLM and we've analyzed them and tried to see where's a good deal for the taxpayer and where's a good deal for the horses, then we have to do, under the National Environmental Policy Act, a NEPA review. And on private land, that might take 3 or 4 months. On public land, it's likely to take about 18 months because it's very possible you would need to amend the land use plan if you were going to change the forage allocation on the public lands. So there's some things that would have to be done. There may even, in some cases, people might propose a sanctuary on lands that weren't inside an original 1971 herd area. And if that were true, we would have to see whether or not Congress would grant legislation amendments to allow wild and free roaming horses that were considered excess to be managed in an area outside the herd area boundaries on public lands. So that's kind of an unknown, but we expect that this, if it happens at all on the public-private combination, that it would probably take at least 18 months to do the analysis and make a decision on that.
And when did you say you thought the timeline was for the second?
Within about 2 weeks to follow the first. Our goal is to have them.
April 1st?
No, I think March 31st.
April 2nd?
We're going to try to get it out in March.
Okay.
We're going to try to get it
March
out in March.
31st.
Yeah. Linda, what did I forget?
When we could actually award.
When we could actually award. That's a really good point, because even though people come in and say, here's this great idea, it's always subject to the appropriations we get from Congress. And so right now we have no budget, and we can go into no new contracts or agreements under the continuing resolution. So for example, if we expect a budget maybe sometime in October for fiscal year 2012, then we would have the money available. But we don't have money available right now for anybody's great idea. We go through a process, we analyze if it's a good deal for the taxpayer, if it's a good deal for the horses. We have a free and open competition process. We do the NEPA analysis. Then we potentially could award our first sanctuaries on private land in about October, November timeframe, if we get a budget.
Using FY 2012 dollars.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Carla, could we use some of the money that we have for short-term and long-term holding for some of these innovative?
Oh yeah, absolutely, in future years. But that the rules say under continuing resolution, no new agreements or contracts. Okay. But yeah, that's exactly where we hope to gain that budget when the contracts for some of the long-term holding or short-term holding expire, or we can take them out of short-term holding at any time, but if the contracts for long-term holding expire, We would then use that same funding source to put these horses into sanctuaries, hopefully get a better deal for the taxpayer and a better deal for the horse.
Okay, and who or what kind of positions?
If I could ask the people in the audience to not talk, it's hard to hear with the rumbling. Thank you.
Who or what kind of positions of people will be on the evaluation committee to select, you know, you follow the selection criteria.
Yeah.
Just give us a flavor of the composition of that group that's going to be evaluating and deciding who gets the contracts.
Yeah, we actually call that a TPEC. I don't know what.
Technical Proposal Evaluation.
Technical Proposal Evaluation Crew, whatever, consortium. But committee, okay. So we're envisioning maybe 5 or 6 people for each of these. So you'll have one group that looks at the private land proposals, maybe a different group that looks at the public-private land proposals, because we basically they're not people that sit on a dais and wait to be asked. They're kind of pulled out. So we'll take some out of the Washington office. We'll take some out of some of the field offices, people that have experience with horses, people that have experience with the long-term holding facilities right now. And then maybe some new people that can help understand what the ability to work with partners entails. It's not the same as working with a contractor. The contractor is in there for a profit, which isn't a bad thing, but the sanctuary people are in there also to benefit the horses and to bring something to the table. Will they bring matching funds? Will they bring some other things that it's kind of different than contracting? And you know, Patty talked earlier about their agreement with BLM where they get paid after they perform. When agreements would do the similar thing for sanctuaries. When they had an expense, they would ask for reimbursement, but they wouldn't get money up front. So that's kind of a different thing as well.